The night my car radio called me by a name that wasn't mine, I almost convinced myself I was just tired. I'd been telling myself that a lot lately. I work dispatch for a county emergency services center in rural Kentucky. 12-hour shifts, overnight rotation every 3 weeks. By the time I clock out at 6 in the morning, my brain is somewhere between fully awake and completely disconnected from my body. You start hearing things on that drive home. A voice in the static, a sound in the road. You learn to ignore most of it. That Tuesday in late October, I pulled out of the parking lot at 6:04 a.m. The sky was still dark, that deep navy blue that comes right before sunrise. The trees along Route 9 had dropped most of their leaves, and they were piled wet along the edges of the road. I remember thinking it looked like the highway was edged in rust. My sister had called right before I left. She wanted to know if I was coming to my nephew's birthday party on Saturday. I told her probably yes, and she laughed and said that meant probably no. She wasn't wrong. I'd been canceling a lot of things lately. That's a separate story. I hung up, connected my Bluetooth, and turned onto the main road. My commute is about 35 minutes. No GPS needed. I've driven that stretch of highway more times than I can count. I know which mile markers have deer problems, which bridges ice over first, which shoulder has the soft gravel that'll grab your tire if you drift. The radio was on low, a country station out of Bowling Green. Nothing interesting. I was thinking about breakfast, whether I had eggs at home, whether I'd actually sleep, or just stare at the ceiling again. That's when the radio cut out. Not a fade, not static, just off. Like someone pressed a button. I glanced at the dashboard. The display still showed the station number, 101.7, but there was no sound coming through. I reached over and tapped the volume knob. Nothing changed. Then a voice came out of the speakers. Not music, not a commercial. A voice. Calm, low, a woman. Don't take the bypass tonight. I actually laughed out loud. I thought it was some weird bleed over from another Bluetooth device, or maybe a navigation prompt from an app I'd accidentally opened. I reached for my phone in the cuff holder. The screen was dark. I pressed the side button. No apps open. No navigation running. The Bluetooth was connected, but there was no active call. No audio source listed. I set the phone down. Told myself it was interference. Happens sometimes out here, where the cell towers are spread thin and signals bounce off each other in weird ways. I kept driving. The bypass the voice mentioned is a shortcut I sometimes take when I want to shave about 8 minutes off the drive. It cuts through a valley, past a horse farm, and links back up to the county road near my turnoff. I wasn't planning to take it that morning. I was too tired to remember to take it, honestly. But then, almost like a reflex, I put on my blinker. The bypass entrance was coming up on the right. Old habit. The radio cut out again. Please, not that road. Stay on the main road. My hand froze on the wheel. The blinker kept ticking. Something about the second time made it different. The first time I could write off. The second time, the voice was. I don't know how to say this without sounding like I've lost my mind. The second time, it sounded urgent. Not mechanical, not like a GPS rerouting. Like someone in the seat next to me leaning over and grabbing my arm. I turned off the blinker. Stayed on Route 9. For a few minutes, nothing happened. The radio came back on, same station, mid-song. I drove in silence and tried to talk myself down. I was exhausted. I'd had 4 hours of sleep before my shift. My body was running on coffee and adrenaline and nothing else. The mind does strange things when it's overtired. I knew this better than most people working dispatch. I'd taken calls from people who swore they saw things that weren't there, and I'd always been patient with them. But privately, I understood how sleep deprivation can unravel a person's grip on ordinary reality. That's what I told myself. I was almost past the bypass junction when I saw the lights, blue and red, strobing through the tree line in the valley below. More than one cruiser, and the orange triangles of emergency road flares. I slowed down and craned my neck as the road curved. Through the gap in the trees, I could just make out the valley road, the bypass, and on it, maybe a quarter-mile in, a scene that made my stomach drop. A semi-truck. On its side. Blocking both lanes completely, even from the distance. Even in the dim early morning light, I could see the cab had gone off the embankment. There was a car visible underneath the trailer. I couldn't tell what kind. I couldn't tell much of anything from where I was. I pulled to the shoulder and sat there with my hazards on for a moment, staring down at it. My radio crackled. My actual work radio, the one on my belt that I always forget to leave in my locker. Multiple vehicle accident, Route 9 bypass. All units, I already knew the stretch. I'd have driven right into it. Coming around that curve at 55 miles an hour with the valley fog cutting visibility to almost nothing, I wouldn't have seen the truck until I was under it. My throat felt like it had closed. I sat there on the shoulder for a long time, long enough that a passing driver slowed down and rolled his window down to ask if I was okay. I waved him on. I wasn't okay, exactly, but I wasn't in danger. I just couldn't make myself start driving again yet. When I finally pulled back onto the road, the radio was quiet. Not off. Just quiet, like it was waiting. I drove the rest of the way home without turning on any music. I kept both hands on the wheel. I watched the road in a way I hadn't since I first got my license at 16. Like every curve was a thing that could turn on me. By the time I got home, the sun was just starting to come up, pale gold, through the kitchen window. I made coffee. I didn't drink. I sat at my table and called my brother. He's a night owl, so I knew he'd be up. He answered on the second ring. "You sound weird," he said. Before I'd finished saying hello, I told him what happened. All of it, the voice, the bypass, the accident scene in the valley. He was quiet for a while after I finished. "It was probably an app," he said, "or Bluetooth interference. Your car's old. My car's a 2019. That's old for car software." I didn't argue. I didn't believe his explanation either, but I didn't have a better one, and I was too tired to fight about it. I went to bed. I didn't sleep. I spent most of the next 2 days acting normal. I went back to work. I picked up a shift for a coworker who was sick. I took my nephew a birthday present 3 days early because I felt guilty about probably missing Saturday, and I sat in my sister's kitchen eating a slice of leftover cake and listening to her talk about the new subdivision going up near the highway. I didn't tell her about the voice. I didn't tell anyone else. What would I say? My car radio told me not to take the shortcut, and it turned out there was a crash there. The logical explanation was exactly what my brother had said. An app, a glitch, a coincidence. There was a crash on the bypass. I happened to not take it. The voice was some kind of audio artifact, case closed, except I couldn't close it. On Thursday morning, I looked up the accident in the local paper. The article was brief. 2 vehicles, a semi and a passenger car. The semi had lost its brakes on the valley grade, jackknifed at the bottom of the curve. The passenger car had been unable to stop in time. The passenger car had 1 occupant, a woman. The article named her Elise Morrow, 41, a physical therapist from the next county over. The same bypass, the same curve, the same early morning darkness and valley fog. She'd been heading home after an early appointment, the article said. She had been driving that bypass for years. She knew it well. I set the paper down on my kitchen table and stared at the wall for a long time. I don't know what I was expecting. I don't know what I was looking for. But something about seeing her name made the whole thing feel different. Less like a strange coincidence and more like a shape I couldn't quite identify. I went back to my car that afternoon. I sat in the driveway with the engine off and looked at the dashboard. Everything was completely normal. The radio came on when I turned the key. The Bluetooth showed my phone connected. No mystery, no weirdness, just a car. I said out loud to no one, "Was that you?" Nothing answered. I felt ridiculous. I went back inside. That night, I pulled up everything I could find about Elise Morrow. Public information, the kind you can find without trying hard. Her physical therapy clinic had a website. She had a Facebook profile, set to public, mostly photos of her dog and her garden, and occasional posts about the hiking trails she liked. She looked like someone's friend. She looked like someone who had no intention of not being alive on a Wednesday morning in late October. I don't know what I was looking for. Maybe I just needed her to be a real person in my mind, not just a name in a newspaper. I found it by accident. An old community forum post from about 3 years ago. She'd written something in a thread about local road safety, about the Route 9 bypass specifically, about how she'd nearly been in an accident on it the previous winter, a truck coming around the curve too fast in icy conditions, and how she'd reported it to the county and nothing had been done. She had been worried about that road. She had said, and I'm remembering this as close to exact as I can, "Someone is going to get killed on that curve someday, and I hope it's not me." I closed my laptop. I sat in the dark for a while. I'm a practical person. I have to be, in my line of work. I take information and I act on it. I don't get paid to have feelings about things. I get paid to route help to the right place as fast as possible. I've heard a lot of terrible things come through my headset, and I've trained myself to process them as tasks, not tragedies, at least while I'm on the clock. But I couldn't process this as a task. Maybe the voice wasn't Elise. I know that. I'm not saying I believe in ghosts. I'm not sure what I believe. I'm saying that a woman who had been afraid of that road for years was killed on it. And on the same morning, something told me to stay away from it. And I'm still here to think about it, and she isn't. That's the part I can't get around. About 2 weeks after the accident, I was driving home on a clear morning, no fog, no drama. I was listening to the radio, same station, 101.7. A song came on that I hadn't heard in years. Something my grandmother used to play in her kitchen on a little portable radio she kept on the windowsill. I don't even know the name of it. Some old country waltz. The radio had never played it before, in the 2 years I'd had that car. I don't think I'm a person who cries easily. Ask my sister. She'll tell you I cried once at a wedding, and it was because the venue had bad HVAC and my allergies were acting up. But I cried then on the highway for no reason I could articulate out loud, except that the song felt like something being set down gently after being carried a long way. I pulled into my driveway and sat there until it finished. Then I went inside and made breakfast and fed my cat and called my sister back about Saturday. I went to the party. I've taken the bypass exactly once since then, in daylight, in good weather, when I needed to pick up a prescription before the pharmacy closed. The county finally put up new signage on that curve, reflective markers and a reduced speed limit. Took them long enough. Every now and then, on the long overnight shifts, when a call goes quiet and I'm alone in the dispatch room with just the hum of the equipment and the dark outside the windows, I think about the idea that the things we can't explain don't have to be frightening. Sometimes they're just present, just something alongside us in the ordinary world, doing what it can with what it has. I never heard the voice again. But I started paying more attention to the static between stations, to the small, quiet moments when something shifts and the air feels different, and some part of you, below the thinking part, already knows what it's about to tell you. I don't know what saved me that morning. I just know I'm glad I listened. If you've ever had a moment like this, something you couldn't explain, something that made you stop and change course, leave it in the comments. I read every single one. And if this story stayed with you, subscribe. There are more out there. More nights I can't fully account for. More roads I'm not sure I should have made it down. I'll see you in the next one. I've thought a lot about why I was the one who got the warning and Elise wasn't. I don't have a clean answer. I'm not sure there is one. But I've stopped needing the answer to be clean. What I keep coming back to is this. I almost didn't listen. The first time the voice came through, I laughed at it. I reached for my phone to figure out what app had glitched. I was already constructing a rational explanation before the sound had even finished coming through the speakers. That's what I do. That's what working dispatch trains you to do. Take the incoming signal, route it correctly, move on. Don't linger, don't get emotional. Don't sit with a strange thing longer than you have to. But I didn't take the bypass. Some part of me, below all that training, decided to stay on the main road. I think about the version of me that didn't, that laughed it off completely and hit the blinker and made the turn. I think about what the dispatcher on duty that morning would have heard come through the radio, and I think about how many times in a life we get a moment like that, a quiet signal, easy to dismiss, easy to route around, and we don't slow down long enough to feel it. Elise knew that road was dangerous. She'd said so in writing, years before it killed her. She'd done the responsible thing and reported it, and nothing changed. That's not a failure of her instincts. That's something else entirely, something about the gap between what we know and what the world is willing to act on in time. What I took from all of it wasn't fear. It took me a while to get there, but it wasn't fear. It was something more like attention. A reminder that paying attention is its own form of courage. Not the dramatic kind, not running into a burning building, just the quiet daily discipline of noticing what's happening around you, listening to the parts of yourself that don't have words yet, and not being so rushed or so tired or so certain that you miss what's being offered. I work a job where people call me in the worst moments of their lives. I'm the voice they reach when everything else has already gone wrong. And I've learned, more times than I can count, that the gap between a close call and a tragedy is often something very small. A second, a decision, a moment where someone either listened or didn't. I listened that morning. I don't fully know why. I don't fully know what I was listening to. But Elise worried about that curve for years, and now there are reflective markers on it and a lower speed limit because of what happened to her. Her concern, the one nobody acted on while she was alive, finally changed something after she was gone. That's the part that stays with me. Not the mystery of the voice, not the question of what it was or where it came from, just the fact that she was right and the world found out too late, and the least I can do with the time I have is pay attention while I still can. I still drive Route 9 home every morning. I still catch myself glancing at the radio when it gets quiet. I'm still listening.